Hey all, today's video is going to be looking at the blood system. This video is for SL. There is going to be an alternate additional HL video related to blood system. This is topic B3.2. We'll be looking at pages 270 to 77. And we're trying to think about what adaptations facilitate transport of fluids in animals. So we want to be thinking of the form and the function of our heart, of our blood vessels, and how they are going to move fluids around our body. So this here is a diagram of the heart, and the atrium are up here at the top, this one and this one. Right atrium is on the left side, because if you were to have your heart inside your chest and then you pulled it out and looked at it, then it would be flipped around once you looked at it. So this is showing how it would look if it were inside your body. And the atrium receive blood from the lungs or from the body, and they pump it down into these big muscular areas called the ventricles. And the ventricles are responsible for pumping blood out to the heart or to the lungs. And so if they're coming out to the lungs, they're going through the pulmonary artery. If they're going out to the body, they're going out through the aorta. And the musculature in the left side of, the right ventricle is thinner, less muscular than on the left side, left ventricle. And this is because the left ventricle pumps out to the aorta, which is going to the whole body, whereas the right ventricle is only pumping out to the artery, the lungs, which are quite close to the heart. The pulmonary artery and vein are going to carry blood to and from the lungs. So not always do arteries carry oxygenated blood, but yes, always arteries carry blood away from the heart and veins carry blood back to the heart. And so pulmonary artery is going to carry blood away from the heart to the lungs to pick up oxygen. And the pulmonary vein, which are behind here and also behind here, they're connecting all in the left atrium here. They are bringing oxygenated blood back to the heart. The aorta is pumping blood out to the body, and you can see it branches up here. That's going up to the head. And then there's other branching down behind the heart here that you can't see. That's going to send that blood to the body. And then the vena cava is the road back from the body. So they have an inferior vena cava and a superior vena cava, and both of those are returning blood to the right atrium from the head region, the upper body region, and then the lower body region. So capillaries, veins, and arteries and their structure are the things we're going to look at next. And so capillaries are very narrow. The inside of a capillary or any kind of tube is called a lumen. So they have thin walls, a narrow lumen, and that's going to allow diffusion in and out. So you can see here, red blood cells are about the diameter of a capillary. And the capillaries are the tiny blood vessels that allow for diffusion of nutrients as well as gases. They have a layer of cells coating of fibrous proteins that are cross-linked to form a gel. This is called the basement membrane, and they will allow small and medium-sized molecules to pass in and out of the capillaries. Red blood cells and macromolecules like proteins cannot pass through the basement membrane. Fluid that leaks out through the basement membrane, so that's going to include amino acids, it might include glucose, is called tissue fluid. And that's similar to blood plasma, except there's no large proteins in it. And that fluid is going to flow between the cells, and then it's going to re-enter the capillaries. And some capillaries have larger pores to allow larger volumes of tissue fluid to be produced. An example of this would be in the kidneys at the glomerulus. And if you're HL, you'll need to know more about that, but otherwise you won't. And then if we're looking at the arteries, arteries are designed to withstand high pressure blood flow. And so they have thick muscular elastic walls. There's a narrow lumen, but not nearly as narrow as the capillaries. So the lumen of an artery like the aorta might be something like that big. So like a 5-cent coin kind of thing. And they're going to carry high blood pressure blood away from the heart. So the layers on here that you will need to know, the tunica externa is the tough outer layer. The tunica media is the thick layer with smooth and elastic fibers. And then the tunica intima is smooth endothelium lining. And so this is the thicker muscular layer, and this is the tougher outer layer here, the tunica externa. And the tunica intima also has some elastic fibers in there. The narrow lumen maintains high blood pressure. And when we're looking at blood pressure, we can measure two different things, systolic pressure and diastolic pressure. And so systolic pressure is the peak pressure achieved in the arteries, and diastolic pressure is the relaxed state of blood pressure in the arteries. When diastolic pressure happens, the elastic fibers of the artery are recoiling and pushing blood further along, and that's going to even out blood flow. When the semilunar valves are closed, blood can't flow backward. So actually, if we look here at the heart, we can see these valves here. These are the atrioventricular valves, and then here are the semilunar valves. And so these valves are to prevent backflow of blood. So the atrium contract the blood down, and then those valves close before the ventricles contract out. And so it prevents the blood from squirting back this way into the atrium. And then additionally, once the blood has been squirted out of the ventricles, these semilunar valves close, and that allows the blood to keep moving out of the arteries and not just flow back into the ventricles. All right, so arteries can also undergo vasoconstriction or dilation. Arterioles are the intermediary point between arteries and capillaries. So they're getting smaller. And if an arteriole is experiencing vasoconstriction, that means that circular muscle in the artery is going to be constricting to reduce blood flow. Whereas vasodilation, the circular muscle is going to relax, and that's going to increase blood flow. And so the circular muscle is the inside muscle part here in an artery. Coronary arteries are the arteries in your heart muscle, and they're the ones providing oxygen to your heart. They're quite narrow. Nothing like the aorta, which is, like I said, like a 5-cent coin, but much more narrow. And those can become blocked by plaque, which will cause blood clots and can lead to a heart attack. If a blood clot blocks the coronary artery to your heart, then blood flow stops to that region of your heart can't get any more oxygen, and then that heart tissue starts to die, and that's what a heart attack is. If you were to measure your pulse, you would be measuring the pumping of your arteries. And so usually you're going to take it on the side of your neck here. So kind of like from the corner of your mouth, draw a line straight down, and then put your fingers, 2 fingers there. You don't want to use your thumb because your thumb actually has a pulse in it, and it can be kind of confusing. You put your 2 fingers under your jawline, around the side. Here's your trachea. It's around the side of your trachea, and push down. And you should be able to feel it. You can also do it on the inside of your wrist. So you're going to take your wrist and 2 or 3 fingers right on, I can't turn my wrist that much, underneath your thumb, right on the edge, and you can feel your pulse that way. Pulse oximeters are the tools that they use in hospitals to measure how much oxygen is in your blood and what your pulse is, and they use a red LED light to measure the oxygen in the bloodstream. So coronary heart disease, this is where plaque is building up in your arteries. Coronary arteries can become blocked by plaque. So we can see here, these are the coronary arteries. And plaque causes calcium salt buildup on the inside of arteries, which causes thrombosis, which are blood clots. High blood pressure is more likely to cause a clot, and that's going to block the oxygen to the heart and cause a heart attack, which is called a myocardial infarction. And this is caused by smoking, excess alcohol, lack of exercise, obesity, eating too much saturated fat and cholesterol, can be related to genetics, high blood pressure, excess salt intake, old age, chronic stress. So all of these things are going to cause more plaque buildup in your arteries. And this has been confirmed by many, many epidemiological studies, which is looking at disease spread. And so you do want to maintaining a healthy lifestyle is really important for maintaining heart and lung health, which will lead to high quality lives as you age. And so especially smoking is a huge problem, not only for lung cancer, but for causing coronary heart disease and long-term negative health outcomes. And this would also be related to smoking marijuana or vaping, because we just don't know the long-term health ramifications of vaping, but short-term, there have been some pretty serious consequences. All right, so for veins structurally are a little bit different than arteries. And actually, if we go back a few slides here, we can see them. So these are veins here, and they have a very thin muscular layer here and a very large lumen. And inside here, they have little valves actually that prevent backflow of blood in the veins. So veins are moving blood back to the heart, and they have much lower pressure, less elastic fibers, and not very thick walls. And there's no pulse in your veins. So if you were to cut an artery, it would squirt blood out in a beat. That would not happen with veins. It would just ooze quickly. But veins need to prevent backflow because there are no hearts in your toes or your feet. You need to get the blood back up to your heart at opposing gravity. And the way that that happens is that your muscle contractions squeeze on your veins and push the blood up towards your heart. But as a byproduct of that, you're not contracting all of your muscles at once. And the blood needs to get squeezed up a little and then stop, and then squeezed up a little and then stopped. And actually about 80% of your blood is resting in your veins when you're at rest. And you might have noticed when you're on airplanes, maybe you're still a bit too young for this, but as you get a bit older, the backflow valves get a bit weaker in your veins. And you'll notice when you're sitting on an airplane for 8 or 10 hours that you start to notice swelling in your ankles and lower legs. And what's going on there is that your blood is pooling in your legs because you aren't moving around very much. And that backflow, like the muscles aren't squeezing onto your veins to push it back up to your heart. And what's happening in varicose veins is that the valves have become damaged and the blood can then flow backwards and pool in your veins. And that'll cause swelling. And they usually form in the legs. This can happen if you are not particularly athletic, if you're sitting for long periods of time due to work, if you are standing a lot, but not moving around very much for work. So a lot of people don't like these. They look kind of unsightly, they think. And so you can have them lasered out, but what is going on there is that the backflow valves are damaged there. So to summarize, arteries are thick-walled to withstand high pressure, while veins are thin-walled with low pressure and valves. And so if you look at these micrographs here, this is an artery, whereas this is a vein. And here you can see similarly, artery, vein. Blood pressure and volume in the heart change through different stages of heart contraction. And so pressure is going to be the highest when the ventricles are contracting, and that's going to be the systolic pressure of your heart. Capillaries are very thin and they exchange gases through the basement membrane. Tissue fluid also leaks out of the basement membrane. And then lastly, coronary heart disease can cause a heart attack and is caused by unhealthy lifestyle choices. All right, thank you for watching. That is the end of this video, and I hope that you were able to understand most of it.